Thank you. Welcome, everybody. First, I want to thank Maria Pagan and the Holyoke Library for hosting us. It's an honor to be here to share with my community. My name is Adrian Alvarado. I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I was raised in Jersey City, raised between Jersey City, New Jersey, and the island of Puerto Rico. I wrote this book, flipping my script, not just as a memoir, but as a way to honor my family, my community, and to share the journey of turning silence into story. Now, I want to invite you and introduce you to a young man. His name is Chino. He's not on this picture right now. But he's in that little poster over there. And he grew up in Jersey City in the 1980s. Going back and forth to Puerto Rico with his family. He grew up in the gaps, in the silence, in between what was said and what wasn't. Now, everybody had stories, right? Stories about love, stories about hustle, stories about the neighbor who borrowed your caldero and somehow it became theirs, right? But his story, my father's story, silence, static. It was like trying to tune into a radio station with no success. Like I said, I was born in Jersey City, but my heart and soul, Puerto Rico. I'm homesick in two places at the same time. Now, my mother, she tried. She was just an island girl stuck in a concrete jungle, fighting for stability and longing for home. Now, she gave me everything she had, except answers. On that, nada. Silence whenever his name came up. Now, I'm gonna take you to a chapter that's called Identity, right? But before I do, I started with a search for my father. So I started searching for him, searching for me, and searching for the pieces that I felt were somewhere else, right? But then I lost her. At 14 years old, cancer took her away. And when you lose your mother at 14, you don't just lose your mother, you lose the map, right? And that loss made me dig deeper, ask harder questions. And it made my father, the man who was silent in my upbringing, an even more vital person in my life. So flipping my script isn't just about surviving poverty or how to break it in Hollywood. It's about retaining our stories, our memories, and saying that I refuse. That I refuse to let silence or absence or even death define who we are. So I'm going to take you to a chapter called Identity. And in this chapter, I was about 15 years old. And I got a job early. I started hustling early. I worked in this pizzeria, washing dishes, folding boxes, whatever I had to do. And this day I was playing video games. I was playing the arcade. And I was singing a song. I'll begin my read as it goes. I was first told I wasn't a real American at Tony's Pizzeria. I was 13, hanging out in between the dinner rush, playing Street Fighter and singing a song by Rick Derringer called I Am a Real American. It featured everyone's favorite wrestler at the time, Hulk Hogan. And I was singing my song. I was like, I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man, right? And right on cue, I'm going to paraphrase as I read. Right on cue, our delivery guy, who was Tony's cousin, walked in. He said, you're not a real American, Chino. You're Puerto Rican. And I was like, what does he mean? I thought to myself, I was born here. I pledge allegiance every day to the flag in school. What does he mean I'm not a real American? So his comments got me thinking. And I kept digging into my culture, right? But before that, I was in the 7th grade. There were two incidents that happened in my life that started my quest for self-discovery, right? That moment with Vinny, and then I was in the 7th grade learning from Mr. Smith. It was our history class. He was a black man. He was teaching us about the civil rights movement. And I raised my hand. I was like, Mr. Smith, were there any Puerto Ricans doing, marching, helping out during the civil rights movement? And he was like, not many. Shook his head no. And that answer just didn't sit right with me. And I realized that Mr. Smith didn't know our history. He only knew his history. The history that he was told to teach us from the Hudson County curriculum. So I started digging deeper, right? Into my culture and background for information. And eventually found the first known Alvarado to arrive in the Antilles of Santo Domingo, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. And I was shocked and surprised when I first saw my last name in the encyclopedia, right? My name was part of history. There he was all along, the Spanish conquistador Pedro Alvarado, born in Badajoz, Spain in 1485. Alvarado was an elite, cruel fighter who later became the second in command to the most famous Spanish conquistador ever, Hernán Cortés. Okay? Now, Pedro de Alvarado and his conquistador buddies set a precedent in the Caribbean that would be followed by many Puerto Rican men. I believe those conquistadores began the tradition of irresponsible dads on the island. The first generation of mixed Spanish and Arawak, born in Puerto Rico, were born without fathers. They were born in silence. They were the sons of conquistadores who came, pillaged, raped the women, killed the men, and left a whole generation of kids without fathers. Growing up without a father was commonplace in my neighborhood. Many of my friends were in the same predicament as me. If our fathers weren't dead, in jail, or strung out on drugs, they were conquering the modern world of women, racetracks, and casinos. This is why I believe many of us Puerto Ricans still grow up fatherless. It's an ingrained generational trauma that we carry. The legacy of the Spanish conquistadores still lives on in the actions of many of their descendants, including my grandfather and father. I knew then that it was up to me to change the family cycle, to flip my script, to build a solid family foundation for my future wife and kids. Now, growing up, I was always curious about my background and what it meant to be Puerto Rican. Nobody had answers for me. Dad wasn't there to teach me, and Mom was busy trying to survive. But I knew we were more than just dysfunction, rice and beans, and salsa music. I learned through continuous exploration that you can uncover profound truths. Truths that we're not taught in the classroom, like discovering that one of the best players in Major League Baseball history, Hall of Famer Roberto Clemente, had a huge part in the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King was his idol. I wasn't taught that. I asked the question, and I wasn't taught that. Clemente was so much of his fan that Dr. King visited Clemente in his farm in Carolina, Puerto Rico. And in 1968, Clemente also spoke up for his teammates over black players when they prompted Major League Baseball to pause opening day until after Dr. King's funeral. So Roberto Clemente, he was definitely a big part of the civil rights movement, part of the miseducation. Now, most folks can easily identify, right? They can say, I'm Irish, I'm German, I'm Polish, I'm Swedish. Me, I'm Puerto Rican. And I knew our DNA was a little more complex. So as soon as the gene technology advanced and became available, I couldn't resist. Yes. I gave up my spit to the DNA and the elite dark shadows of the government, just so I can get a sense of what my heritage, my European heritage, and African and Native heritage. Now, the rumor growing up is that much of our population in Puerto Rico had a mixed African, Spanish, and Taino indigenous, right? With dashes of the rest of the world. But I like how much of that was true, and what was part of my makeup. So officially, I am 27% Spain, Portugal. I am 18% indigenous Puerto Rico. Hi, welcome. Come on in, have a seat. Buen día, buen día. I am 14% Congo, Cameroon, the Western Bantu peoples. I am 9% Wales. I am 6% Basque, which is also part of Spain. I am 6% England, Northern Europe. 3% Benin Tongo, 3% Northern Africa, 3% Jewish, 2% Senegal, 1% Nigerian, and 1% Indigenous Americas, Mexico, and 1% Scotland. That's a Boricua for you, in a nutshell, right? Before I move on to the next chapter, do we have any questions about identity? Or, yeah, okay. Now, I'm going to bring you to a chapter here. Now, I'm going to share some of the assimilation struggles that some of us in the Puerto Rican diaspora experienced, at least I did in the 80s. My family kept going back and forth. My mom really wanted to live in Puerto Rico. She did not want to live in the United States. She had her house in Salinas, Puerto Rico, and she wanted to make her home there and raise as Puerto Rican. But Operation Bootstrap, assimilated my dad and my stepdad, and they were all about America. And she tried 2 times to move over there. I went to school, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and she was a beautician hairstylist. And she had her own little shop there, was cutting everybody's hair in el barrio. And unfortunately, times were tough. The economic on the island in the early 80s, it was a recession in America. So if there's a recession in America, its colonies suffer even more, which caused a huge travel back and forth, trying to figure out where's the best place to raise your family. And that's what my family was going through. And when I was born, unfortunately, I was the 3rd boy. My parents were sort of divorcing. So when I was born, my parents weren't together already. And I didn't meet my dad till I was 9 years old. And that's when I had to start looking for him. Because I was like, well, my grandmother kept talking about him. My Flaco. I keep hearing about him. Where is he? Right? So, in my search for my identity, we came back from Puerto Rico. And this chapter is called Sucked Away. After my summer away in Puerto Rico, I returned to Jersey City and dove right back into school life. I was attending Dr. Michael Conti's school number 5. My teacher that year was Miss O'Neill, and Miss O'Neill and I had a turbulent relationship. She was the first teacher to start kicking me out of the classroom for acting up. I began to exhibit unruly behavior, talking during class, making jokes, falling off my chair. I remember feeling embarrassed at times for wearing the same clothes, coming to class, smelling like armpits. The energy and structure in our family life was changing. At 9 years old, I was entering the 5th grade, and I faced a jarring episode that marked the start of another downward spiral in our household. I came home from school one day to find our door wide open, and the lock was busted. Inside, our VCR, HBO box, and TV were stolen. I was confused and furious. Who would rob us? My brother Eddie's escalating drug issues and shady behavior, and the crowd that he rode with likely had a hand in this. Or maybe Eddie did it himself, making it look like we were robbed. When my mom confronted Eddie, he fed her some line about claiming that he owed some guys money. All I knew was that our home was stripped of his entertainment. What now? My stepdad, Louis, was exasperated. He wanted Eddie gone for good. Louis had followed my mom to Puerto Rico, taking a chance on us, and had come to love her and me as his own. But now my parents faced another critical juncture. It was either him or Eddie. I could imagine the turmoil my mom endured, struggling to salvage her son and her marriage while juggling her role as a wife and mother, and losing on all fronts. Whether we lived in Salinas or in Jersey City, my stepfather and brother's issues were not going away. Neither were hers. Eddie and Louis were like oil and water. They were never going to get along. And my brother wasn't making it easier with his rebellious behavior. Louis had also grown tired of my mom's involvement with her social club. Their visits there together dwindled as my mom clung to the club. She enjoyed her drinks and cigarettes. The club became her escape, her home away from home. It wasn't my favorite place, and my sister didn't know any better. I recall many nights pulling on her arm, begging her to go home. One night, perhaps, was the final straw for Louis. He came to pick up Shailene and found her napping on the club's pool table. That sight must have been too much for him to bear. From that night onward, Louis changed. His frustrations with my mom, his drinking and his drinking, late nights at the club turned our home into a battleground. Arguments erupted more frequently, often escalating to the point where I had to intervene. Despite my mother's flaws, she was still my mother. I loved her deeply, even as I watched her struggle with her demons. The club was her refuge, but it was also a trap, pulling her further away from family and the life she wanted. As much as I wanted to save her, I was just a kid, powerless against the tide that was pulling her under. Now, Louis was a kind and decent man, a good stepfather, and I considered him my dad. However, Louis liked to drink himself, and his temper became increasingly volatile. He began to manifest his frustrations physically. One night, I vividly recall returning from the social club late when Louis suddenly jumped out of his car and began berating my mom. He grabbed her by the shoulders and then forcefully rammed her back against the brick wall. And what followed was a horrific scene. Louis unleashed a flurry of punches on my mom, reminiscent of a boxer reminiscent of a boxer in the ring attacking her body until she collapsed. It was barbaric. I was paralyzed with shock and fear, holding my sister's hand and screaming for him. He eventually stopped. I ran into our building's hallway looking for help. And when I returned, I saw Louis driving away with my sister in his car. I helped my mom up. That night, as I helped her out of her clothes and her pain was palpable, I could see bruises begin to appear near her ribcage, and I felt a profound sense of helplessness and shame because I couldn't protect her. I couldn't fully understand the root of Louis's violence towards my mom. I was just a kid. But the undeniable truth was clear. No man should ever lay his hands on a woman, no matter what. My mom needed help, not beatings. Those incidents irreparably changed my views of Louis and the vicious cycle of this poverty mindset. Shortly after, Louis moved out, renting an apartment nearby. Now, I share that story because this book isn't just about Hollywood, not just about identity, but there's a process and things that happen in between that lead you to find yourself and to dig deeper. And those incidents changed my life forever. It made me a seeker and a loner and a storyteller. So, now what you've heard this afternoon are pieces of my story. Stories of silence, of searching, of loss, but also of resilience, laughter, and a flip in the script. But here's the truth, right? It's not just my story, it's our story. It's a story of families who leave home to survive, of kids who grow up piecing their identity one question at a time, and the story of mothers who give everything they have, even when the world gives nothing back. When I lost my mother at 14, I thought I lost my history. But standing here with you, I realize that I am the history. This book is the history, and the history that lives in all of your stories. So I'll leave you with this. We don't get to choose the script that we're born into, but we do get to flip it. Page by page, choice by choice, until silence becomes story and absence becomes legacy. Thank you. Let me see if I can show. All right. Do we have any questions? What do we got?
So it's not a question, it's like when you were telling your story, I started recollecting my memories and my history, my own story, and there was a lot of connections of your story that connected me, that reminded me of that. I was like, oh, that happened to me, and I remember that. My nickname, when I was born blonde hair and blue eyes. This is what they say. They nicknamed me Gringo.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was growing up, I was too Gringo for the Puerto Ricans and too Puerto Ricans for the Gringos. So I found myself battling between identity and lust.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't figure it out. You know, as I grew older, I started understanding more. So just like you said, it's everyone has their story. but eventually you're the author of your world.
Yeah.
You get to choose how you write those pages, right? At the end of the day, it's not just how you identify, but it's your story that you identify with, you know? For me, that's how I grew. That's how I got to where I am today.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Of course, thank you.
And that's what it's about. You know, it happens a lot in our community. You know, us Puerto Ricans that are born here and the ones that are born on the island, they say, "Oh, you're not Boricua, you're not Boricua enough," and this and that. And I shoot them right down. I say, this is the whole divide and conquer thing. You're not helping, you know, because being Puerto Rican doesn't mean you're born on the island. I take a chance and I define it in my book, what it means to be Puerto Rican. It just means being a good person, taking care of your family, your community, and being the best person you can be. That's what being Puerto Rican is. Doesn't mean anything else. It's like being any other person. And it's a shame that, you know, I have a story. I have an actor friend, his name is Wayne Lopez. He's Puerto Rican from Long Island originally. And he told me a story that when he went to Puerto Rico as a teenager, one of his uncles was teasing him. He's like, ¿De dónde tú eres? Where are you from? He's like, well, I'm Puerto Rican. I'm from here. He's like, no, tú eres de allá. Right? He's like, it devastated him. You know? And that's a shame. And I always challenge those people when I, you know, my people, when I come across them. You know, I go, don't do that, because you don't have a peso in your pocket. You have a U.S. American dollar. So, you know, it's you know, but I'm glad that this is resonating with you, and this is why I wrote this book. You know, to honor my mom, to tell our stories. Currently in Hollywood, in the industry. So as Latinos, we represent over 20% of the population, right? But on television and film, we are only receiving 3 to 4% of all the roles written in television and film are for people that look like me. 4%. It's a huge disparity. It's a huge motivation for me to tell my story.
Growing up, as you know, growing up, when I was born in 1970, I didn't see our people on TV.
Mm-hmm.
In the Jetsons, there wasn't even people of color. In the Flintstones, which would be the beginning of time, no people of color.
Yeah.
It was just crazy and bizarre to me. I didn't.
Oh, yeah, we have Ricardo Montalban, we have Fantasy Island. Those are the faces. See, I have my older brother, right? He was 7.5 years older than me. And he loved Chico and the Man, right? And Chips. So those are the first Latino faces I saw. You know, Eric Estrada and, you know, Chico and the Man and Ricardo Montalban. And I thought everybody was Puerto Rican. That was my ignorance as a kid. Every Latino person on TV, oh, they're Puerto Rican like me. That's why I was searching for my identity. And then I realized, no, they're something else. What am I? Who am I? You know, and that became, you know, part of the whole search. But yeah, it's great. You know.
Did you ever catch up with your dad?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that in the book, though?
Yeah. I get into, you know, I kind of teased it a little bit, but I did, yes, I fought for it.
How old were you?
There's a chapter in the book.
That's all I want to know.
How old?
I want to hear all the details.
How old I was? What?
When
I
you
just want to know how old you were when you.
I was 11 years old when I went. I met him when I was like 9, turning 10 years old. I tell that story. When I saw when my mom introduced me to him. You know, on the corner of 5th and Este tu pai. ¿Qué pasó? He walks around, ¿Qué pasó, Adrián? You want to come live with me? Eh? And then I went to look for him. After that, he goes, come look for me. That was the first child support payment. After I met him, he pulls out a knot and gives me $10. And I was like, even more confused. My dad's got money? What do you mean? We're struggling here. What's going on, right? And he goes, come, I'll be at the Old San Juan, this Old San Juan bar. That was my dad wasn't a big drinker, he was a gambler. His action, he loved action. He was the guy in the back room running the game for the owner. So that was his love, the horses and craps and just games. That took him away from me, from us. But I would knock on that old San Juan door and walk through that bar and went to that back room and I looked for him. I go, hey, I'm hungry. And yeah, it's a very intimate story when I go in there. It's the first time he calls me his son. And there's a moment that I have with him there. He introduces me, hey, this is my son. And I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
that's my dad. Yeah.
Is flipping a script used as a metaphor for the changes a person can make, regardless of the circumstance where they were raised? And is balance, your thoughts, only inherited by the poor?
What's that last part?
If violence is only inherited by poor people,
Mm-hmm.
because let's call it a stereotype,
Mm-hmm.
or let's call it the racism,
Mm-hmm.
or anything similar, your thoughts about that?
So the first part, yes, it's flipping my script. It plays on a lot. It plays on flipping your environment. You know, understanding that okay, wait, I really have to do the work myself, right? And then also plays into my career, scripts. You know, I read a lot of scripts. I'm an actor. Flipping my script kind of plays into both worlds that I came out of. So that took care of the title there. And it also comes from one of my favorite movie lines of all time. There was this movie called Sugar Hill that stars Wesley Snipes,
Oh, yeah.
right? And it's about two brothers in Harlem and stuff. And then one line, Wesley Snipes says to his brother, it's time for us to flip the script, right? Just that line. And it always stuck with me. It's time for me to flip the script. He said it was that's how he said it. It's time for me to flip the script. And I was like, ooh. And that always resonated with me. And then years later, it became the title of my book. When it comes to violence, I definitely think you can inherit it if you allow it. I mean, I grew up around it and I didn't allow it. I didn't allow myself to inherit that violence. Could have. Where it comes from, I could only speak about my Boricua history and my experience. When I think about the Puerto Rican male, and because Puerto Rico is still a colony, 500 years, we know this, right? So what does that mean? It means we have no authority of ourselves, right? So what does that do even more subconsciously to the subconscious Jiwaro, right? Us, the peasants on the island who know that they have no power. The only power they can do is control their house, control that woman. I think that's an ingrained sort of self-consciousness, you know, because I touch on it briefly. There's the male chauvinism on the island. That's huge still, you know. It's very violent on the island. I go to Puerto Rico at least 2 times a year. My father, he's still alive, 79 years old. When I had my kid, there's a few things that because I want to finish answering your question. When I had my kid, my father was in and out of prison too. So when he came out, I took him in when I had my apartment at 18. And our relationship really started taking off there. I definitely started asking questions. And when my son was born, I'm like, hey, you can start new. I don't care what happened in the past anymore, but if you want to be part of his life, you're more than welcome to. I would love for him to have his grandfather. And he said, okay. And he's been part of his life ever since. And my daughter. But yeah, I think that's what, you know, it's something even, I'm not a psychologist, we're not going to get into that, but it's something deep in there where that violence comes from. And poverty could lead to it. Self-consciousness could lead to it. Many things. Anyone else?
When you were going through your DNA and where you're coming from, where we come from,
Mm-hmm.
and your story resonates with a lot nowadays. A lot of kids are going through the same thing that you went through.
It's funny you mentioned that.
So that's kind of interesting because even when they're born here, because you are descendant, you're still considered Puerto Rican,
Yeah.
Puertorriqueño, Boricua.
We're technically Puerto Rican Americans, right? When you think about it.
But even when we
But we
say
don't
Puerto
say it.
Rican, we're
We
still
don't say that.
American because we're, like you said, the colony.
Mhm.
We have the U.S. citizenship, but they still, they're Puerto Rican.
Yeah. You know, in my process, when I was finishing my book, I reached out to, when I was in high school, I knew I was going to write a book. I told my English teacher, Mr. Corcoran, Mr. C, I'm going to write a book one day. Because I had just found a book by Esmeralda Santiago, right? And this was like 1993, 1992, and it was the first book by a Puerto Rican author that I ever held in my hand. And when I just read that book, I'm like, I'm going to write a book one day, right? I had already lost my mind. I know I got a story, right? I said, I know I got a story. And there were some other things that happened after that. And long story short, two things. Mr. C, when I released my book last year, came to my book signing. He's retired. He's about 80 years old. And he was at my book signing. And I reached out to Esmeralda during my process, and she responded and mentored me to finish my book. And she told me I had made a reference to a Puerto Rican American, and she scolded me. She's like, "Oh, we're not Puerto Rican American, we're Americans." Right? And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm not saying that we're not. I'm just saying that, you know, people say Italian American, Irish American." But she was like, "No, we're not Puerto Rican American." She jumped at me. But it was all in good nature, right? And I'm like, okay, I see your point, but I don't think you're seeing my point. Because we're technically Puerto Rican Americans, right? We can't say we're Spanish American because of our heritage, because it's so infused. But long story short, she gave me some good advice. She told me to write with all my passion, all my love, all my hate, and that it would take me far, and it would bring me here. Yeah.
I'm 67, but I'm still slightly confused. So I think personally that I spent 20 years in the military. So I did my part.
Thank you for your service.
And I have a friend of mine, which we have opposite views. And his view is like, if you feel that way, go to Puerto Rico. Right? Because if I identify myself, I've been here since I was a little kid. For instance, and I won't get on that, but Bad Bunny is not a American citizen, according to some politicians. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have this debate in my mind whether people know the full impact that we've been here since the American Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And in all categories, we've been at the top, right? Whether it's the art, entertainment, things like that nature. So I tell people I may be considered American, but I'm not from North America, even though I've been raised here all my life. And I like to actually remind people I was born in Puerto Rico. I am Puerto Rican. I just happen to be here doing everything possible not to assimilate, right? Because I don't even care for that word. But a lot of people that I meet along the way, I don't think they provide the respect because for some people, I'm not really an American.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's the reason I'm always having a question mark. And I'm not sure really what an American is because, you know, history shifts the script often enough. And unfortunately now we have a situation where if I don't carry my ID,
Mm-hmm.
I may get caught in the mix, and then maybe later on they'll recognize that I just happen to
Mm-hmm.
be from this country.
Yeah.
it's just one of those things for me that I always had I don't mind fighting for America.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? And,
But we want America to fight for you too.
Right.
That's the idea.
You know, basically regardless, my feelings,
Mhm.
regardless of how long I'm here, I was born in Puerto Rico, will be Puerto Rican.
That's right.
If you want to deem me an American, it's all good by me. I'm not saying I wouldn't fight for America. I spent 20 years, but the thing is that if you respect me 100% as an American, if that's what we're claiming,
Mhm.
then it's all good. If you're going to like send me back to Puerto Rico, according to some people I have conversations with,
Yeah.
um,
It's unfortunate, and I think it's just people are not educated, right?
yeah.
We're not because at the end of the day, we're North Americans. In my opinion, we're North Americans, because somebody born in Ecuador is an American too. They just happen to be South American. So there's a miseducation going on. Unfortunately, the powers that be and the system that we have hijacks the word American, that we're the only Americans that exist, and that's untrue. Canadians are Americans too, because they're in the continent of North America. So anybody in this continent is American. That's my opinion. So your actions and your history make you and define who you are. If somebody doesn't understand, that's their problem. That's their opinion, and it's a very bad, uneducated opinion. You're 100% both. There was one of my favorite poets who was one of my inspirations growing up. His name is Miguel Piñero. And he's one of the founders of the New Eurekan Poets Cafe.
You're a poet cafe, right?
And he coined the phrase New Eurekan, right? And he has a thing goes, even though I'm half and half, each one of those half is more whole than all of you. All right? So he's not half and half. I'm 100%, 100%. That's what Piñero would say.
He was teaching Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, they would, because he went to Puerto Rico, and they're like, why are you calling yourself New Eurekan? Like, it's a different race. He's like, because you guys are calling me half and half, but each one of those halves is more whole than all of you. He was speaking on something there. Anyone else? Any more questions?
I'm just gonna say, because you mentioned you gave your spit up, so did I. I will admit it, because I had these questions about some of the things that were said when I was a child, and why was I nicknamed Gringo? So I wanted to put an end to those rumors. And so this is what it came back with: 24% Spaniard, 14% Portugal, 5% Northern Spain, 3% Azores, don't even know what that is. Azores, 2% Basque, and 2% Canary
The Can-
Islands, and then 13% Puerto Rico. It says Puerto Rico.
Indigenous.
Yeah, indigenous. And then Eastern South America, 1%, and then Central Scotland and Northern Ireland, 8%. Top of the morning to you.
Top of the morning to you.
So what I'm saying with this, with all of this DNA, information,
Mm-hmm.
I am still Puerto Rican.
Yep.
You can't tell me, I was raised Puerto Rican.
That's it. That's the thing. It's like, it just means, that's just our heritage. That's what our blood is. The Puerto Rican, it's like I said, just being a good person.
Yeah.
It's culturally, of course, we different. You have our own music, we have our own flavor of food. Yeah, that's part of it too. But, that's not everything, right?
Right.
But I think we look similar. I'll show you. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. So I guess us all Puerto Ricans are born blonde and stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that was him. That's his picture?
No, this is me.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in my book.
We're brothers.
Any more questions before we wrap this up? Yes.
I'm curious to hear a little bit more specific in terms of, when you look at the times from growing up,
Mhm.
the experiences that you had at that time, and then deciding that you're going to flip your script. What was the biggest thing that, or what was some of the experiences that, you know, you said, this is not what I want to, how I want to live my life, or
Mhm.
whatever the changes that I want to make, that you go from living in poverty to being an actor, and then to being a writer. Somewhere in there, I want to know the juicy, not the,
Well,
not the
yeah, well-
says, but I want to know, like, what
Yeah.
made you change your mind, or say, I want to do something different.
Hmm. Well, the first person who did that was my father. Like, I don't want to be like him. That was number one. Like, before I built my relationship with him, I had a lot of anger and resentment towards him, you know. So that kept building. And to the point where I didn't understand what it was, right? That, on top of my brother, my brother was 7.5 years older than me. And unfortunately, my brother fell into addiction. You know, in the 80s, you know, it was an epidemic. There was a war, literally war on drugs, right? Nancy Reagan, just say no. Like my neighborhood, we were losing the battle. A lot of people in my brother's generation, they're gone. These guys are they're in their 50s, they're gone in downtown Jersey City. So me not wanting to be like my brother because of the way he upset my mom and would make her cry. You know, his actions, you know, she trusted him to pay the bills. Back in the day, you know, you had to go to the PSE&G and pay the bill, right? You had to go to the phone company and pay the bill, literally, and stand online. So she would have to trust him, and he would take the money. And then we would end up with no phone, no light. So those things, like, I'm not gonna be like this. Those were some of the things that really, in the beginning, that sparked me. Just family-based, like I knew I didn't want that. And then, you know, growing up in Jersey City, you know, everything's very sort of, what do we say? You know, what are the words we use? You get canceled now. You can't say. I mean, you know, back in the day, it was different. You know, it's Puerto Rican. You know, the Polacks over here and the brothers over here. You know, I was called the typical Puerto Rican, right? I have a chapter here called Typical. I'm like, typical what? Right? Typical that I come from a broken home. Typical that we're on welfare. Typical that my brother's on drugs. Started to resonate with me. I'm like, no, I'm going to show you that I'm not typical. When I first told somebody I was going to be an actor, they said, you're only going to play the bad guys, right? Drug addicts, the drug dealers. And that was fuel. That added more wood to my fire. I'm like, I'll show you. So there's a great series. I'll share some of my stuff that's coming up. But that was big fire for me. My father, my brother, and my community. It was rough. You know, my neighborhood was rough. You know, it was street, you know, you know what I'm saying? And I was always a little different. I was the actor. You know, I had a job. I didn't want to hang out in the corner, right? I had a job at 11 years old. My friends were selling drugs. At 13, my best friend got his girl pregnant. You know, I was like, all these things were happening around me. I'm like, nope, nope, nope. Not gonna do it, right? There's a character in my book who played a big role in my life. His name is Tony. And I was adopted by this Italian family. Not adopted, but they took me in while my mom was sick and took care of me. And he had a big influence on me. Always talking to me, ignore those kids. You got a good head on your shoulder, Chino. You know? So I held on to all the positive that came to me. And I clung to that. My teachers, my 2 English teachers that were amazing. My drama teacher, Mr. Wonder. I talk about him in the book. Changed my life. So, all of those things get you going. Yeah. So look out this season. There's a series called The Greatest. It's produced by Amazon. It's based on the life of Muhammad Ali. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to reveal things that it's sanctioned by the family, and it's going to reveal things you've never learned about him. And I'm honored to play the fight doctor, Dr. Ferdy Pacheco. So you'll be seeing that coming up next year sometime. It's going to be great. Thank you all for coming. If anybody wants to sign a book, take a picture,